everybody, Codingers back, and today we're going to be talking about Emmet. So Emmet is essentially a bunch of shortcuts which are used for HTML and CSS. It's essentially used for typing out HTML code efficiently, cleanly, and really quickly. So what essentially does is you type a really small amount of code, it generates a lot of boilerplate code out there for us. So in case you like content like this and check out my previous videos, please hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell for further notifications for my future videos. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'm gonna be zooming this in so you can see properly. So then let me just generate my index.html file and I'm gonna zoom it in. Okay, so yes. And then, so the first and most basic Emmet shortcut that I use the most is essentially this. It's just an exclamation point, and then you hit enter. It generates all of this boilerplate code out there for us. So this is essentially an Emmet abbreviation. Suppose we put this, and you see it's written here, Emmet abbreviation, and then I just hit enter, and then you get this doc type HTML and all of this boilerplate code out there for us for these meta tags and all of the above. So let's get started with some of the other Emmet tags and classes what you could use. So for starters in Emmet, you don't have to start by putting out all the tag like div and all of that. What you could just do is type div. You get it generated, and then yeah, you could type span, form. Yeah, you could get any of them there. You want input, you get input. So as you see here, the HTML and Emmet recognize that an input needs to either type. You need to type for it to take place. I mean, it assumes the default type is going to be text, but it enters the type attribute to this tag and then highlights this entire text. So if you want, you could change it to suppose number with just one click of the backspace button. So yeah, it generates that. And then for a anchor tag, it recognizes that you need the href attribute for it, or else it's going to be literally useless. So it generates that href attribute and keeps the cursor in the middle of the speech marks right there. So yeah, so I'm going to be keeping comment. Okay, so this is for number 1, part 1. Let's just name it that. So we want part 2. So for that, we're going to be talking about generating IDs and classes using Emmet. Essentially, if we want to generate a span element and then put a class of, let's say, gas or liquid, okay, span dot liquid. So what we essentially do is keep the name of the element and then keep the name of the class with a period in between them, and then essentially click enter, you get a class of liquid. And suppose you want to span with an ID of solid, span, and then you keep the pound symbol, ID of solid, so solid. And then boom, you get span with an ID of solid. Suppose you want to combine both of the classes and the IDs. What you could do is I'm going to just be demonstrating that to you with the help of a button dot click with an ID of press. So you get a class of click, ID of press. So and then there's one more aspect to this. So when you don't specify any of the HTML tags and just put suppose solid, it automatically assumes Emmet automatically assumes here you're going to be using a div, because it's the most widely used tag in HTML. Suppose you want an ID of, let's say, plasma. You get an ID of plasma. You want a class of solid, ID of plasma. You get that. Suppose you want two classes, dot plasma, dot energy, dot, let's say, power, and then ID of red. So you get plasma, energy, power, and then an ID of red. So these essentially are totally different classes of HTML, and they can be used to select items. They can be used to select these tags and their contents inside of them in CSS. So this is part 2, we could call it. And then we're going to be talking about making parent and children elements. Or wait, let's just first talk about putting additional attributes and text inside of them. Okay, so what we could do is, suppose you want a form. Okay, it automatically gives you this. Suppose you want it with a method of get. You click with a colon. You enter a colon and then you put get inside of it. It automatically generates this piece of code with method as get. Suppose you want to keep, suppose name. Okay, so form name. That's gonna give you a name attribute. Suppose you finish typing or whatever this is. Tab. Wait, it's gonna do that when you get normal HTML. Tab. It automatically goes from the action attribute after you're done filling it in to the name attribute. So yeah, this is one part of it. Suppose you want to enter this part of it as well. So suppose I want to enter the parameter of it as well. So what you could do is, with an input type equals email. So that's how this works. And suppose you want to generate the text inside of it. So href equals slash, which means this page itself, and then click me. So what the curly braces essentially do is they get the text to be displayed on the page. So that can be part 3 of this. And then let's go on. So part 4. What they essentially can be is now generating children elements and parent elements. So what are parent elements and what are children elements? Suppose I want to make a div, and inside of it I have a nav. So this div is a parent element, this nav is a children element. So I'm going to be showing you how to generate this using using Emmet. And then let me just save it, okay? And then suppose we want to generate that. We get a div, then we put nav. So essentially what we're going to do is put a greater than symbol. First put a div, a greater than symbol, and then a nav. Suppose we want to make children elements inside of the nav. We put li. So a nav, and then inside of it we get an li. So yeah, this isn't essentially what this Emmet only does. What you could do is you could put a div with a class of glass, and then you could put a nav, and then suppose you want to create multiple LIs. Let's say you want to create 4 LIs. You put li times, you put the star symbol, and then 4. So you get these 4 LIs pre-populated for you. And then suppose what we could do is, if you want to enter text inside this li, what you could do is go down, tab this up. Okay, so div nav li times 4, and then you put, you put this, and then you could put whatever text you have. Wait, this, Yeah, see, so now unfortunately you get the same text in every li. So this is one of the drawbacks of this part. And then I'll be showing you some other amazing thing to get consecutive numbers onto your text of the LIs. So div, same thing, nav, same thing, li times, times 4 with let's say list, let's say grocery item, and you put the dollar sign, you're gonna get it being consecutively populated. Oops, that's the square bracket, I forgot. So that's gonna make separate attributes. So if we change this essentially to a curly bracket and take these squares off, I'm going to be getting this again. Yeah, you see, you get grocery item 1, grocery item 2, grocery item 3, grocery item 4, because you put that little dollar sign, which essentially tells us that we need to input consecutive numbers into these text elements of these divs, of these LIs, I mean, sorry. So next up, we could essentially do this to classes as well. So div, and then we put a nav, li times 4, and what we could do is dot list item period. So you get list item 1, list item 2, list item 3, list item 4 is class. You could do the same thing for ID, but it's really easy. Just replace the period sign with a pound sign, and that'll essentially give you 4 different IDs saying list item 1, list item 2, list item 3, list item 4. So yeah, that's that. And then let's take a look at, suppose you have a div, okay, with a nav, okay, and then main and a footer, but the main and the footer are not going to be children elements of the div. They're just going to be the sibling. They're just going to be the sibling elements. So we put a nav here, and what we essentially do is we put a caret sign, and then we put the main. So what this essentially does is, oops, this gets it out of here. Sorry. So first, I'm going to have to be talking you through how to create sibling elements. So how you create sibling elements essentially is you add the plus operator and you put whatever tag you want. So this essentially is a sibling operator of this. It isn't a children element like what you might call if I put this in here. So that's a children element, but this is essentially a sibling element. So that's how we generate that. What if you want a sibling element inside one of the other elements and then another sibling element of the parent element? So I know that's very complicated to process right now, but I'm just going to be showing you that. Suppose you have a div with child element of nav, and then suppose you put the plus operator here for the main and for the footer. This is not going to be what you're going to be expecting. So footer is a child element, main is a child element of the div, so you're not going to be expecting that. So we need a way to get back to the parent element stage from the children element. So what you could do is you could put the caret symbol. Essentially, you would translate all of the remaining code back to the sibling element stage of the div. So we could do the caret symbol, but it's just a little too unconventional, you could say. So what I like doing is wrap this around in parentheses, and we put a plus, just like BODMAS and math, which you have learned or are learning. It's parentheses first, and then the rest of the the rest of the operations that follow. So we do this, it's going to yield the exact same output as before. It does not make a difference. So this is another segment of it. And then suppose I talk about children elements, parent elements, and then this is essentially what is there, like the basics of Emmet on HTML. And then I'm going to be talking about what it is to CSS. So what you could essentially do is, I'm just going to be creating a style in the head, sorry. Wait, you could actually generate link tags. Forgot to tell you about that. So for link, it automatically assumes that it's a style sheet. and it places your cursor in the middle of the href. But what I like to do is, because most of the things I'm going to be linking are CSS at the beginner stage, unless I use Font Awesome or Google Fonts API, I'm going to be using link and colon CSS. So automatically you won't have to worry because all our files are style.css. So yeah, this is also the link tag, and I want to be styling my document. So if you want to use CSS, actually this style in actual apps when you're going to be implementing HTML and CSS, these style tags are actually not recommended. The actual CSS file like style.css is preferred, but because just for the sake of this video, I'm going to be performing all of our styles here. Suppose I choose the class and come down here. Suppose I want a width of 10 pixels. Type W, you get all of this width as an Emmet abbreviation, and press enter. I get this width without a value being pre-populated yet. Control Z back, and then suppose I want a width of say 10 rem. It's a lot, but you see a width with 10 rem. Enter. A height, same thing, 45%. You get height 45%. For background color, BK gives you background break. BG gives you background. It's a little hard to remember all of the Emmet. So it's not actually all, it's like just like 0.01% of the entire Emmet that's there. I'm gonna be linking the cheat sheet of Emmet in the description below. You could check it out at your free. So BG essentially is the background. It automatically generates black background for us in case you want to change it to white. No, FFF, you get white. Or suppose you want background color BGC, you get background color. And BGI, you get background image. And yeah, you get those sort of BKC, background color. And then BGI, background image. Yeah, and there are many different Emmet elements you could play around with. I mean, this makes your code a hell lot cleaner and a lot faster. So I don't actually use Emmet a lot except for when I'm generating divs. Suppose like I want a div with a class of container, I use Emmet. And then otherwise I just use this as I showed you, the starting the exclamation point and hit enter. I use that too. And then yeah, I don't actually use it for this big piece of code. And then so I guess I'm just gonna be using that for classes, IDs, and yeah, I use Emmet. Did you know that I used Emmet a lot without actually knowing it? In CSS, I used to actually type these sort of shortcuts, and then yeah, I just made my coding speed a lot faster. But yeah, in case you want to use a lot more Emmet, I have the documentation and that cheat sheet linked right below in the description, so you can feel free to check it out. I will also be putting this code in GitHub, so you can, in the description below, so you can be checking it out when you're free and try to play around with what's gonna be known as my dear friend Emmet. So that's all for now. In case you like this video, please subscribe and like it, and thanks for watching. See you folks.